to answer them. So I also just wanted to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar, so it will be possible to access it after the event is over. We'll send out notice to everyone who registered with a link to it so they can find it online. And obviously, any of those people can follow up with questions afterwards too. So thank you for joining, and let's get started. So some of this is going to be a review or at least tangible reality for those of you who are working with nonprofits, but some of this might be a surprise to some of the people in our audience today that nonprofits, the nonprofit field is actually a very quickly growing industry. They're actually contributing about $779 billion worth of goods and services in the U.S. alone, and they account for about 10% of the jobs in the U.S. And in 2011, the majority of those nonprofits, as you can see, were reporting that demand for their services had increased. And that's both a good and a bad thing. Obviously, we're in somewhat uncertain financial straits, and so a lot of people can't meet the demands for those services that are being requested of them, like in places like Texas, or there are stories about like communities always having to constantly search for alternative overflow shelters or alternative venues for their homeless because the resources are just dried up and strained beyond their capacity. And bear in mind, a lot of this isn't just because the government funding is limited or because there's tough competition for grants. It's also because individual giving is lower during a recession. This, of course, leads to nonprofit leadership responding with some priorities for the coming year, and that comes as no surprise to anyone that one of the leading priorities will be donor acquisition to help supplement some of those programs. But they're also focused on community engagement and brand awareness. And they're all doing all of this without enough time or budget or people, and that's not an uncommon story. They've got development programs that are trying to make up the differences that are sometimes in the millions of dollars. Now, some of these problems are perennial, obviously, no matter what the economic climate is. Nonprofits operate close to the margins, and it's always a challenge to be able to meet all those demands. But the nice thing is, what we're going to talk about here today is that there are more tools now available to supplement some of these efforts, and that it's easier to do than it ever has been before. Now, I assume that most everyone here knows what crowdsourcing is. Basically, it's a buzzword for something that's been going on for a very long time. But as a review, it's basically reaching out to a large external group of people for help in solving some sort of problem or issue. A lot of people will use things like group knowledge or collective intelligence, open innovation, open ideation, and individuals and organizations reaching out to larger groups. That's been happening for a long time. Even the model of reaching out to volunteers to get work done for nonprofit tasks is, in a sense, crowdsourcing. But the difference is that it's never been as easy as it is now. There are numerous digital tools with numerous capabilities that are available online, and with internet penetration as high as it is, I think it's somewhere in the high 70s in the US and as high as the high 90s in Europe. It's a great resource for a number of reasons, and one is that it allows nonprofits to meet multiple goals at once. Not only does it minimize overhead costs, because for the most part, most of these tools, the cost is still relatively low, but it also increases the odds of finding ways to save money, kind of trim the fat in programs, and simultaneously, it is also a marketing, advertising, outreach tool. You're not just recruiting volunteers or getting ideas. You're spreading the word about your organization. It's highly transparent, which for grant reporting sometimes is indispensable, and it also provides an archival resource of knowledge that can be tapped into at any time. So we have an example that we like at IdeaScale about how simply efficiency can occur. One of our restaurant clients looked to their employees specifically for cost savings ideas, and they got hundreds and they implemented lots of them, and they're saving lots of money. But for an example, one idea alone was from a waitress who suggested that they simply stop using ketchup bottles on tables and instead replace that with 2-ounce ramekins full of ketchup on dishes that required ketchup. And it seems really simple, but this one idea saved the company $200,000 a year. And that's just one idea. Imagine how many programs and problems you could solve if you just had an extra $200,000. And they had all the tools to make it happen. They were able to implement very swiftly. And so that's one example we like. Another example that we like is an ongoing example, the President's Save Award. Every year he asks for ideas from federal employees about how the government can save taxpayers money. People vote on those ideas, and then they're vetted by the Office of Budget Management for impact and the feasibility of implementing them. And they're saving literally millions of dollars each year from just one idea, although they implement many. And that's just cost savings. There are also many people who are using crowdsourcing to increase sustainability or tap into new ways for a business to function or develop new programs. So we've got lots of examples like this, but I'd really like to give the majority of the time to Robyn here, who is using crowdsourcing at Cerebral Palsy Alliance. So she can give you some examples of how they're using it to increase the efficiency of their program. So, Robyn?
Hello, everyone. Jessica, we'll move on to the next slide. Thanks. Just a little bit of a background. I come from an organisation that's based in Sydney, Australia, called Cerebral Palsy Alliance. But cerebral palsy affects 17 million people around the world. It's primarily a physical disability, but there are a lot of other associated issues that make it very complex, and it's a lifelong disability. So the circles of support that are required around many people with cerebral palsy are quite extensive. We're a very large Australian not-for-profit, and we provide a range of services to people with cerebral palsy and their families. We have about 1,000 staff and about 1,000 volunteers. And one really key thing for our organisation is that Australians are very early adopters of technology, and we're a very digitally connected workforce and a digitally connected organisation, and that's yielding huge benefits around this particular project. So if we move on to the next slide, I just want to show you a few photos. We were in fact the first organisation of its kind in the world for people with cerebral palsy, and you'll see there on the top left. It was really interesting because we started in December 1944, and there was a large community spirit around our organisation because prior to that parents couldn't find any support or help for their children with cerebral palsy. And many were told, to put them in a home and forget that they ever had a child. And our parents said, no, we're not going to do that. But what was fascinating is that as that first cohort of children grew older, their needs changed. And so as an organisation, we needed to be innovative from the get-go in terms of the services that we provided. But the other really important thing is that at that point, we weren't operating out of 70 locations, we were operating out of one. And there were enormous opportunities for parents and then later for clients as they grew older to have input and to come up with solutions, and they were fed through to the services that we delivered. But as we grew bigger, it was harder to connect in that way. On the bottom right-hand photo is a photo of our new innovation space at our building here at Allambie, and that has some significance that I'll tell you a little bit more about later. So if we move on to the next slide, with any project, I guess you all know, you always go to first principles. And the first principle for us is our mission. Our mission is building futures for people with cerebral palsy. And in fact, we're quite ambitious for an organisation of our size in that we want to do three things. We have three pillars of our vision. The first is the cure and prevention of cerebral palsy, and we have an extraordinary research team and a research foundation that is working globally to bring together the leading researchers in cerebral palsy to collaboratively set priorities and to galvanise and accelerate innovation around research into cerebral palsy. A few years ago, we thought that cerebral palsy was just one of those complex issues, it was damage to the developing brain, there was no hope of cure and prevention, and now incrementally we're seeing that if we direct our research efforts strategically, there could be quite big breakthroughs through it. So we have instigated a collaborative group called Impact for CP, and they're starting to work together worldwide, which is really exciting. The second pillar of our vision is a better world for people with cerebral palsy. So we, together with our counterparts in the US, started a pilot last year called World Cerebral Palsy Day, and I'll talk to that a bit more later. And then close to home, it's around better services for our clients and families. And we divide that into two areas. One is actually coming up with solutions for better services that we deliver to our clients and families. But then the second aspect of that is also improving our back office functions so that every piece of value in our organisation goes towards our clients and families, so to our frontline services. And we're not called Cerebral Palsy Alliance for nothing. We really truly believe that it is an alliance and that everyone has a role to play. So we'll move on to the next slide, and I'll tell you a little bit about our first IdeaScale project. So we're using IdeaScale in 3 different ways. The first is an innovation hub, which is linked from our intranet. This was the first installation of IdeaScale. It's a private community. We started it in April of last year, and it's been an enormous success. We have linked from our intranet the innovation hub, but we threw it open to the crowd, and we said that we'll have 3 or 4 campaigns a year. Our CEO will ask a question, and then we invite everyone in the organisation, whether they're a new graduate, whether they're a senior manager, and everyone in between, to post ideas. And of course, what's happened now is that there's been a lot of unexpected bonuses to this, because not only have we got over 150 ideas, 180 odd comments, and well over 1,000 votes, but what's happening is that we're seeing innovative talent emerge, and they're people that we might never have heard of, and they're just extraordinary. We have such an extraordinary, resourceful group of divergent thinkers in our organisation, and such talent for thinking outside the square, and we're encouraging that in a whole lot of different ways. And I think that's been pivotal to the success of this program. When we launched the Innovation Hub, a colleague and I visited every program in our organisation for what we called an innovation roadshow, and we basically were giving them permission to think laterally, to question the status quo, and to start to identify barriers to productivity and service improvements. And they've responded really, really well. We also have a monthly orientation for new staff, and we go along and we have a half-hour slot in that day to talk about innovation and the value of new employees in spotting things that we who've been here, some years might not see, and the fact that they're bringing in ideas from university or college or other employment, and they will often come up with some of the best ideas because they're a pair of fresh eyes. And the other thing is we're working really, really hard with different leadership groups within the organisation to help them spot innovative talent when they're recruiting, and then how to nurture and foster that talent. And in fact, we're now weaving this through every part of our HR system, so that one of the performance criteria on which we all have to report each year is around innovation and creativity. The real key to the success of this was that it was led and endorsed by senior management. And the lovely part about IdeaScale is that A, it was really, really easy to implement. B, it has a lot of functions that you can turn off or on. So we turned the voting down, off, and so you can only vote up. But you can also set a weekly email which compiles all the ideas and all the comments each week. And I have that set to send to all of our senior management group on a Saturday morning. So they're getting that on their Blackberries on Saturday morning. And there's been quite a few times where our CEO or another manager has been galvanised into action over the weekend by an idea or a comment that's been posted on the Innovation Hub, and I think that's really fabulous. So it's highlighted a number of really great ideas. It's highlighted a number of just do it ideas. So they're ideas that we think they don't take much time, that will save huge amounts in productivity if you amortize that over the whole workforce. But it's also raised systemic issues, and the lovely part about IdeaScale is that people can share their story. And so there was one instance where a girl described some of the issues she was having around technology and how inefficient it was, but she painted this beautiful picture which galvanized our already fantastic IT team into escalating to even greater heights some of the implementation of some of the projects that they were doing, which was really great. And the other thing is that it encourages everyone to be solution focused, and I think that's really positive for an organisation like ours. Some of the challenges in this is really around the building capacity, so it's a face-to-face program in addition to an online program, and we're also running events in our innovation space to kind of provoke people's thinking around that. And the other thing is that we must ensure there's tangible outcomes. So the senior management group commit to every campaign to prototyping or trialling at least one idea, and in fact they're starting to commit to even more. I think in the first campaign they committed to 3 ideas, and that's then an opportunity for innovative talent around our organisation to take on a leadership role around the implementation of that trial. And the other thing that we have to make sure we do is communicate back to our stakeholders the outcomes and the progress of each campaign, and we've been doing that through the Innovation Hub. So move on to the next project that we have with IdeaScale. This was called Ideas for CPA, and we soft launched it last year, and we haven't actually put a lot of effort into it, but that's going to be ramping up in 2013. So this is an innovation community for our clients and families. It's a way for our clients and families on an ongoing basis to give us ideas about how we could be providing services to them. And we're entering a very different climate in Australia, even though we survived the global financial crisis in quite good form, as we're moving as an organisation into a very different landscape where funding will go directly to our clients to buy the services that they want. So we have to reposition our organisation, and it's really, really important for us to have to play a part in generating ideas and be very, very customer focused and listen to our customers, and IdeaScale is one of the ways that we can do that. It's interesting though, I think a lot of our clients aren't used to being asked their opinion, and so we have to run face-to-face events this year to brainstorm ideas with them, and basically again give them permission to start posting ideas up on Ideas for CPA. And then the third project's World Cerebral Palsy Day, which I'm going to be leading in collaboration with a number of different countries around the world. So this is a global project, and it's targeting the 17 million people with cerebral palsy living in the world, but it's also targeting the families and their friends and the people that support them. And it's designed to gather ideas from people living with cerebral palsy around the world, and we used the theme Change My World in 1 minute. So it was piloted in 2012. We asked that community to pitch an idea that would take no more than 1 minute to read, or they could do it via video, so no more than 1 minute to view. And it's around an idea that would change their world. And it could be about anything. It could be about education technology, it could be about public policy. We actually just threw it open to the crowd to see what was most important to them. And for a pilot, it was very, very successful. We had 28 countries participating. We had hundreds and hundreds of ideas. We found that it was very much embraced by the global community of people with cerebral palsy because they were allowed to have their opinion. It wasn't policymakers saying it, it wasn't service providers saying it, it was them saying it, and that's very, very empowering. And for many people with cerebral palsy, they have communication issues, and sometimes it's very hard for people to understand what they're saying because it affects the muscles around the throat and the mouth. And some people with cerebral palsy can't talk at all, but a lot of them can be online and can have their say online, and that's really, really powerful. The other thing with the World Cerebral Palsy Day project is that it then drew attention to the needs of people with cerebral palsy, to the global community of researchers and inventors and innovators and hackers and makers, and that's piqued the interest of a lot of that group into the needs of cerebral palsy, and it's kind of elevated the whole issue. So it's had a number of other consequences that were set as sort of secondary objectives to the whole project, but have been a really nice outcome. The challenges for us with World Cerebral Palsy Day around multiple languages. Of course, our website was just in English last year, and so this year we're introducing the website in 4 additional languages, including French, Spanish, and Chinese, and Turkish, and then another 4 languages in 2014. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge, of course, is equity of access for people in less developed countries who may not have access to the technology. The other part of it is we've got to kind of consider what happens to all the good ideas that aren't shortlisted. So we're kind of working on making those ideas visible. I might hand over to Jessica because I'm about to cough. I'm sorry.
Of course. And I think that now's a good time to hand it over to questions. If anybody has any questions, they can go ahead and type them into the questions feed, and Robyn and I are glad to answer anything that you might throw at us. So go ahead and we'll give you a second to type them in, and then we'll see what comes up.
While that's happening, Jessica, you and I were talking offline about one idea that you said, had yielded results for us with the Innovation Hub. Perfect example of that was a very clunky room booking system that we had at our Alampi campus here. And it would take probably 10 minutes to make a meeting room booking, and there was no way to cancel those meeting room bookings without a very complicated effort. And somebody just posted up an idea of, my goodness, why can't we just open an Outlook calendar of all the meeting rooms so we can all book our own? And this idea had been mooted some years ago, and it was kind of felt that, oh no, we can't do that because people might accidentally delete other people's meetings, and we can't trust the employees to be vigilant about that. And lo and behold, they decided to implement it, and the savings for 200 people times 10 minutes, maybe 3 times a week, that's a lot for a not-for-profit. And if we can find these small improvements all the time, that the little things, I think you have an expression, take care of the pennies and the dollars will then result. And I think that's the same with not-for-profits.
Yeah.
Because, you translate that across 200 staff. And lo and behold, when you give people the power, they rise to the occasion. And guess what? There's been no one accidentally deleting other people's room bookings. It all can be done in a very, very quick way. And there's other really nice outcomes for some of our staff, because they've You know, another idea was around the staff directory on the intranet, and something blindingly obvious that hadn't occurred to the web team. And
Yeah.
somebody suggested a new way of searching, and guess what? One of our digital people in the web team came back within 5 minutes and said, "Look, I've just done it." And that's really pleasing for people to see that their ideas are being heard and implemented straight off.
We do have a question in now, Robyn. One of the questions was, what kind of technical issues did you have, if
In
you had
terms of the
any?
implementation of IdeaScale,
Yes.
no, look, we didn't have any at all. And honestly, I'm a content manager on websites, but I'm not an engineer or a builder at all, or a designer. And I could get into the back end and just work it out. It was really easy. And we set up a sandbox site to test it and IdeaScale suggested that. We just downloaded the free trial and set up a sandbox site, and had it up and running within 24 hours. It was that easy.
Another question was, if you could do your campaigns all over again, what would you do differently this time around?
I guess we tried probably to implement the three all at once, over the space of 6 months, and that was too much. So that's where Ideas for CPA we didn't get the attention that it deserved. So, we were concentrating on the Innovation Hub and World CPA Day. So I think in hindsight, we did the right thing by setting up the internal one first, because we practiced and tested on that one and kind of used it as our beta site, and then launch World CPA Day. But